car, you can sit on all these properties. And that's 1,400 feet. No.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. We'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is pledge of allegiance. Please rise. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, so first order item on the agenda is a call to the public. Anybody here would like to make comments prior to the meeting?
I thought we had to have 4 members to have a meeting.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah,
Okay.
we're going through the.
And I was kind of worried about that. I guess I'll speak.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just, I've been here for a long time. Things just keep changing and changing and changing. Notifications seems to be a big problem around here. Well, now notifying us about meetings. I mean, I used to have notifications come to my phone. I don't know, I'm just losing way too much respect for what's going on in the leadership township. They're not notifying anybody on what's going on. I know there's a website. I shouldn't have to, they say, sign up for the emails.
Yeah.
And everything goes to you. It's not going to be done right. It's not your guys' fault. It goes up to the office. It goes up to leadership. The leadership's getting terrible.
Yes, Scott, I guess on that item, are you talking specifically about this meeting tonight?
Yeah,
Okay. The notification went out through the email on November 11th.
yeah. All right.
So, yeah, for this meeting.
Well, we didn't get the packet.
The packet was posted, I think it was Tuesday, right?
So we didn't
The
get it.
requirements are that the notification of the meeting is posted.
All right, so,
Right.
okay.
But, yep, understood. Thanks for the comment. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Jeanette Ropetta. So to speak to that, so everyone knows what happened, yes, the meeting notification went out on Thursday in an email and said that there would be a planning commission meeting tonight. Watch for Monday, we will post the packet. So I watched on Monday, didn't see anything. In the morning, looked in the afternoon, nothing. In the evening, no. Looked Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, nothing. Then later, I think it was quite late Tuesday afternoon that it was posted. So this morning, I sent an email to the township and asked them, okay, now I see the notification of the packet. Could you send out another mass email? You know how easy that is. You just write your email, use your subscriber list, put the link in there for where the packet is. Would you mind doing that? And also, would you mind Zooming it? Because there's a lot of people that still don't feel comfortable coming out to meetings, or they're traveling, or they can't. I know one person in particular that is at another meeting and rushing home to be with her children. So the answer on that was basically no. All we're asking for, because we want to work with you guys, we want transparency, we want the community to know what's going on. I think it would have been very fair and very, what do I want to say, just cooperative if the answer had been, sure, no problem, we'll just send that email up. What could it have hurt? Instead, I got a response that said, oh, we can't send out we can't email big documents like that. They never email documents, they always send the link. So, I don't know, it seemed to me like an avoidance to share the information. But anyway, I'm really glad that there's a lot of people here. And I hope that going forward, I hope you guys don't have a problem with Zooming. I've offered to help with training with Zooming, setting it up. I can do that. It's not really a big deal for me to help out with that. I just would like to see more transparency and involvement for the community. People got really used to doing Zoom meetings with COVID, and I think it would be really nice to continue that on. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hey, Rich, I didn't use 3 minutes. I got one more comment.
Okay. Go ahead, Scott.
We keep questioning this master plan. And I think somebody was talking the other day said they questioned the board. They said there's $10,000 put aside for it, but they asked, well, when are they going to come up with the budget? We got 10,000, and more or less, it's like they couldn't give us a straight answer. in the office. It wasn't me, but it was somebody else that called. I'm not gonna give them their name, but this is what I got. So we got $10,000, don't we have $10,000? Do we have a budget or don't we have a budget? We're canceling all these board meetings, and we've been asking and asking. We got other communities around here, we posted them, that are going to have a master plan. Talking to the people, getting the stuff going. And here we just keep canceling meetings. We have no business. Hell, we don't have no business. Master plan's number one. We're way behind now. It's not you guys. Direction has to come from the supervisor to say, listen, let's go. Here's the money, let's go. I mean, it just, we keep asking. I mean, we posted it, all the news articles on the paper. Everybody else is doing their thing, but this time. And it's getting ridiculous.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All right, so approval of the agenda. Is there any, unfortunately, we do not have a quorum, right? There are members on the planning commission that were not able to attend, that were planning to attend. So we cannot conduct business. We can go through the planning, our planners' reviews, but we cannot vote on any of the agenda items. We can discuss items, but we cannot vote on them. And this was in the last hour, we received one email, person cannot attend. So, and then we don't know where another member is. We called, couldn't reach him. But just so everyone's aware, right? We will run through our agenda and what we have. There's been much work done by the applicants, and we have revised plans that were submitted and reviews from our planner, so we can go through those. So that's an update. So I don't know, or Chet, and then also, I guess, before we start, we have a new member, Chet Schultz, so we'd like to welcome him and thank him for joining. So, and then, so yeah, I think, Kurt, I think we can't go through the minutes. I have the minutes here. We can review them, but we all reviewed those on our own. We can't vote on that. So I think, Zach, if you don't mind, I guess maybe, I don't know if I need an approval to skip, or we can't do it anyway. So we'll just move on to old business one.
Yeah, we'll just go with what
Yeah.
we have for the agenda.
Right, so going to old business, item number 1, Lake Urban Crossing, preliminary PUD. So we have received revised site plans as well as a review from our planning consultants, and so we could go through that, and for everyone's awareness, if you haven't been here for other meetings, this has been through multiple planning commission meetings and public hearing. So this has been reviewed multiple times, but there are some updates. So Zach, if you're ready,
Yep.
kind of go through it.
And my apologies, I'm a little stumbly or awkward tonight. I made notes on my paper copy, and then I was on the couch with my puppy dog, and he distracted me, and they're sitting there on the table right now. But I've got digital versions here.
But he didn't either.
No, well, he was distracted opening boxes instead. So Lake Urban Crossings, as a reminder for those who've been here and for the newer folks, is a planned unit development, which is a special land use throughout the zoning district. Because it's going to be developed with individual lots, it also requires a site plan approval. And the preliminary approval is kind of the first step. There are a couple of decisions. Does it generally comply with the ordinances? Are there specific things you want to see in final site plan approval? And looking at the parallel plan. So a planned unit development is a tool made available through the State Zoning Enabling Act that recognizes projects with recognizable and substantial benefits to the users of the development and the community, with an opportunity to make modifications of the zoning standards. So you can make smaller lots, you can make narrower lots, you can make different setbacks, different lot coverage, or you can reward certain things with additional lots beyond what would be available. So that's kind of our starting point. Preliminary approval only grants rights to begin final approval. So we're at that point now. Preliminary approval has not been granted. That's what would have been discussed tonight. We're going to run through some of the details here. And I will try to keep you updated on the pages as I scroll through here. Property information. It's at roughly the corner of Runyon Lake Road and White Lake Road. There's actually some properties at the corner, but this is just behind that. It's roughly 158 acres. That includes wetlands and the water. It has roughly 70 feet of frontage along Runyon Lake Road and 1,835 feet of frontage along White Lake. It's currently undeveloped with woodlands, wetlands, and water. And you've got the image there of the property. Currently, it's within the RE Rural Estate District. However, for PUD purposes, your zoning ordinance has a rather forward-looking feature where it says, if you're going to request additional lots beyond what would be available in the parallel plan, you need to prepare that parallel plan based on zoning districts that are consistent with the future land use map. The future land use map is what the community and its master plan wants to see in an area in the future, 5, 10, 20 years into the future. This property is in the equivalent of 2 different zoning districts. The western portion is in the R2 single family. The eastern portion would be in the RE rural estate, so that's consistent with the current. Let's see. I'm scrolling ahead a couple of pages here because we've covered. If you can go to page 5, just want to make everyone aware of this. You see there that the property is divided between the 2 different future land use areas. The parallel plan uses a slightly different line for the boundary between the green and the yellow. It follows the boundary of Lake Urban, and at previous discussions, the Planning Commission felt that that was consistent because there are other places where natural boundaries, natural features are used as the boundary. And so that's what the parallel plan that's as part of this is based on. As far as natural features, there's a lot of topography. Water body, Denton Creek flows through it. There are a lot of wetlands, and they're likely all state-regulated wetlands. There's significant woodlands on the property, and there's a variety of soils, as one would expect on a property this large, ranging from loamy sands, which are rather comfortable with development, to muck, which is fancy geological speak for just mucky soil. It's an onomatopoeia, I guess. And I did want to bring up that because of some of the soils there, construction of individual structures may be more complicated than a typical house where you dig footings and you put the foundation up. But those types of details are generally reviewed as part of the building permit process. It may require helical piers, which are big fancy screws that they put down, and then the foundation goes on top of that. But that's typically done as part of individual permitting processes. Scrolling ahead to page 7 there. So this is a bit more complex table than you'll see with most developments. That's because it's a PUD. So on the far left, the RE rural estate, that's what the current zoning district is. So by right, you could develop something that meets those standards. For parallel plan purposes, the R2 single family is in there, and the RE is also in there again, just to remind folks. And that's in there because as part of the PUD process, this body, the township needs to determine if the parallel plan is feasible. And by feasible, I want to kind of say it's the eyeball test. Do the lots meet the development size? Is there a place to put required landscaping? Is there adequate space for streets and for utilities and landscaping? Not necessarily showing all of the details for how the stormwater system is sized, but it has to be feasible. As you see there for the parallel plan, it's generally consistent with the zoning districts, aligned with the master plan. There are a couple of lots where it's a little bit off, but it appears possible to make minor modifications. You see the right column there, proposed PUD. Those are the proposed developmental standards. So if a PUD is approved, it essentially becomes a mini zoning district. And those would be the standards for minimum lot areas, for lot width, for lot coverage, and setbacks. Which is, again, this would essentially create a mini zoning district. It's a bit weird thing in planning and zoning, but they can propose it and the township can approve those. For access and circulation, they're both in the parallel plan and the proposed PUD plan. There's 2 access points. One of them is from the west, one of them is from the south, and there's I do want to address here, section 11.02 access for planned unit development says that planned unit developments shall be located so that it can be accessed from a paved county primary road able to safely serve the proposed development without adverse impact on the community. So, as I believe I mentioned it last time, there's unfortunate phrasing in there where it has shall, which is mandatory, and can, which is possible. So we look to other sections beyond the plain language of the zoning ordinance for guidance, and as mentioned in here, for cemeteries, open storage yards, the zoning ordinance says that they shall have direct access to certain categories of roads. Then for churches, colleges, golf courses, and contractors limited storage, the language is some variation of that all access shall be directly from certain types of roads. So in other places of the zoning ordinance, the language is very clear that says this is the only way you can get to the property. And so our interpretation is that the proposed location and the access is consistent with the language as it's written. It may not have been the intent of the folks who wrote it, but the pairing of shall and can causes some challenges for a very strict reading. So that's kind of an important thing. Do folks have questions about that right now before I go on? Okay. So generally, while we're on access here, most roads are limited to providing access. Most roads with a single access point can only provide access for 30 dwelling units, and that comes down from International Fire Code because they're concerned about being able to get equipment there. In this township, boulevarded entrances have been interpreted as being multiple access points with the rationale that if there's an accident or something blocking one side of the boulevard entrance, emergency vehicles are able to access from the other. If you recall, we had that with the 2 shared private driveways question recently. And both of the proposed entrances for here will have boulevard or partial boulevard entrances. But additionally, the language in the zoning ordinance allows planned unit developments to have up to 50 dwelling units per single access point. And both of the phases in the proposed planned unit development are less than that. Now, that doesn't mean that the developer doesn't have to do some additional things to make the fire department happy, but that's outside of the zoning ordinance. Let's see. With the revised plan, there were several lots that were removed from the northern border of phase 1. And we believe it's likely that the end of Valencia, it kind of ends in a stub now, may have to be reconfigured between now and final approval to allow for large vehicle turnaround. So think garbage trucks, and mostly garbage trucks are going to be the ones using it the most. But also potentially fire, depending on the exact length of that. The proposed planning development will be served by public sanitary sewer throughout. It's available currently on the northern edge of the site, and it's our understanding that there's adequate capacity and adequate number of taps for the proposed PUD and the conventional plan. There will be stormwater management improvements on the site. Generally, they will have some sort of a pre-treatment bay to allow sediment and other things to settle out. Because it discharges into into the water and into state regulated wetlands, it will require permits from folks above here, Livingston County Water Resources Commissioner and Department, what's their fancy name, Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. And basically, you're allowed to discharge at the same rate as the land discharges now. So whether or not it's developed with conventional plan, parallel plan, or remains, the outflow will remain at the same rate. And the way they do that is with different control structures, with different fancy drill bits into the concrete. But that's the idea generally with the stormwater management. For landscaping and screening, the current plan as it's been revised calls for 4 species of trees: Austrian pine, blue spruce, American sweet gum, and black maple, with 34 trees along White Lake Road, 43 along the northern lot line, and an additional 16 along the southwest property boundary. I talked with our landscape expert, and so these are his recommendations. I don't know tree species so well except for maple trees. I know them really well. But he did recommend a couple of changes, that the blue spruce it can be prone to disease. It doesn't mean you can't plant it, but maybe plant a bit fewer of them and put another species in there. And that especially in some of the wetter areas, especially along the northern border, that some different tree species should be considered. The firs, Douglas fir, balsam fir, and red maple, because they tend to do better in those types of soils. In the current plan, it shows rough locations. There's not the calculations, but we're able to see where it came from, but those should be added to a final site plan, as well as clear vision areas at intersections to make sure there's no landscaping in there. For lighting, there are locations shown for street lighting on the internal streets within it. There aren't details for what those streets lights would be. That's something that have to be required as part of final site plan approval. And the Planning Commission could require street lights as part of the PUD. The applicant in previous meetings have said that they're going to put it in. And so it's similar to sidewalks, that this body can require it, and they've put it in there without this body requiring it. There's not information about entrance signs right now. That should be added to the final site plan. And the reason why we want to see those on there is to make sure that it doesn't interfere with landscaping or any utilities in the area. And so I'm going to run through real quickly some of the plan unit development general requirements. First, I'm going to take a sip of Mountain Dew. So the big issues, or the kind of the starting entry points, are that the area for the PUD has to be under single ownership. You can't have multiple parties, and the reason why that's generally done is because you're making special commitments, you want to make sure that there's one person who's responsible for carrying those out. It has to be at least 20 contiguous acres, and as mentioned, it's significantly larger than that. It needs to have adequate utilities, water and wastewater. It needs, again, we mentioned, the PUD shall be located so that can be accessed from a paved county primary road, able to safely serve the proposed development without adverse impact on the community. One of the things that this body can require as part of preliminary approval is a traffic impact statement. It's mandatory for final site plan approval, but if there's a question about the appropriateness of the capacity on the road system, this body could request it as part of preliminary. We did receive some preliminary information from the developer, but not the full traffic impact statement. The uses is proposed to be single-family residential dwellings only. There is a parallel plan that's included in there. The parallel plan shows building envelopes, including attached garages, and the floor area for those proposed buildings, or those sample buildings, are larger than the minimum required square footage in the township. Let's see, for additional lots. So it's very common for plan unit developments to allow opportunities for additional lots. it's kind of the carrot and the stick, is that planned unit developments put more burden on an applicant to do additional things. And so in exchange for that, they get the carrot of providing more lots. So there are a couple of ways that planned unit development can receive those additional lots. If you do certain elements, the township can say, yep, you've met this, and if you really meet it, you get 5%. If you don't meet it at all, you get 0% from the parallel plan. There's a cap of 15% increase. That's rounded down. And the elements that they're proposing to meet for the density bonus are superior architecture and design, providing public amenities such as trails for non-motorized use, children's playgrounds, picnic facilities, or community centers. In this case, it's trails for non-motorized use. And G, stormwater management that relies upon natural systems to the greatest extent possible and preserves the quality and integrity of such systems. So that's the use of the wetlands for the discharge of the treated water. So one of the questions you're going to have to face when reviewing this is, does the proposed plan meet those, and does it meet it for the full 5% additional bonus for each unit, or for each element? As mentioned, I'm scrolling down to page 13 now. The proposed PUD is requesting modified developmental standards. The standards that they're requesting as part of approval are on the far right side of the table there. So basically, phase 1 would have larger lots at ½ an acre. Phase 2, the southern portion, would have lots at 18,000 square feet. The lot width would be reduced to 90 feet for both of the phases. Lot coverage, and this is within the individual lots, would be 35%. Front setbacks, in some cases, would be reduced to 35 feet, with a maximum of 50 for some of the lots. Side yard setbacks of 15 and rear of 35. So those would be the developmental standards for anything that gets built if the modifications are approved. And for phasing, it's proposed to be in 2 phases, as has been described. Next up is open space. So one of the things that has been hardwired into your standards for planned unit developments as a recognizable and substantial benefit is preserving open space. And your standard is 30% of the total land area of the portion of the site that is designated for residential use. So that language is a bit weird, designated for residential use. When you look in the context of the rest of the PUD article, it alludes that you could have a mixed planned unit development with some commercial and some residential. And so the way that reads is, if you have stores along the street frontage, that portion that's commercial would not be included in here. But in this case, the whole thing is considered residential use. The math generally checks out. So 30% of the total land area equals 46.96 acres. And there's some limits on what can count towards that. A maximum of 25% can come from submerged lands. A maximum of 35% can come from wetlands. And the rest of it would have to be upland and dry land. There are calculations on there saying that there are 49.34 acres of submerged land, so that's the water body, but there's a maximum of 11.74 that can count towards the minimum. There's a lot of math here, my apologies for that, but it's math. And I lost my spot there. 24.95 acres of wetland, but there's a maximum of 16.43 of that can count. And so the rest of it would have to be upland. Their calculations are a little bit off on that, so the amount that they're providing is correct at the 15.44, but the math that they have incorrectly says that there's a 40% cap on that, but there's no upper limit on the amount of upland that you can have. So they actually get a little bit more open space than their calculations on that page show, but it is still short 3.35 acres of the required 30% that you've got hardwired in. One thing we note is that there is a limit on stormwater basins that can count towards there, so that the amount that's used for that should be added so that we can confirm calculations. So hardwired into your zoning ordinance is the 30%, but there are also a couple of options for waivers for that. So the first one is that the township can approve non-contiguous open space. So that's a fancy pants way of saying, if you need 10 acres or 5 acres or an acre, if you get an acre or 5 acres or 10 acres somewhere else in the township and you protect it as open space, just like the open space on here, the township can allow that. And we can go through the criteria for that. I'm going to scroll up here. At the discretion of the Planning Commission and Township Board, if it finds that the site characteristics, surrounding natural features, and proposed design features and uses lend themselves to different open space requirements. So the other option, aside from non-contiguous, and I want you to keep that last language I shared in your mind, is the township could say, you're 3 acres short, but because of the nature of the site and what's around it and the design features of the planned unit development, we can approve you with the percentage of open space that they're providing in this plan. Does that make sense? So the baseline is ordinance wants you to shoot for 30. There's an option to have non-contiguous open space count towards it, and there's an option for the township to waive or modify it with those 3 criteria in there. We already talked about emergency access. There will be internal circulation, both vehicular and pedestrian systems, and a rather extensive trail system in addition to the sidewalks. Scrolling down, the utilities will be buried, except for the boxes that will be popped up. Those exact locations aren't on here. The proposed plantings are shown. It's not a super detailed plan, but again, the purpose of preliminary approval is to make sure that, or to check to make sure that there's reasonable space for required landscaping on there. Parking will be individual parking on the lots. And one thing that's particular for PUD is that there needs to be language about hours of construction and nuisance mitigation measures on the site plan itself, as opposed to separately managed. So this is kind of very specific for the planned unit development. All right, onto the parallel plan. I feel like I've spoken about that to death, so my apologies, but again, the idea is that the body needs to determine if the conventional plan with the zoning districts consistent with the future land use map are feasible. Are the lots appropriate in width, in size, and can you actually put a house in there that meets the minimum size? Do you have space for roads and utilities and stormwater? Our quick take, although we defer to the township engineer for stormwater and utilities, is that the lots appear to meet or would meet the standards with minor modification, and it appears that the lot coverage standards would be met by looking at it. So those are the big things. I won't get into decision criteria right now since we can't decide. Instead, I will jump so that folks can start thinking about it to the very back. As a reminder, this body makes a recommendation to the township board, and then anything would have to come back for final site plan and PUD approval. First, and I tried to break this out a little bit differently, on page 26. Gosh, that's a long report, I'm sorry guys, but this is pretty complex. There are a couple of determinations for the body. The first one is whenever you receive a site plan with a scale greater than 1 inch equals 100, you need to waive that. Your zoning ordinance says 1 inch to 100 is the largest you can do. You could also kind of split the baby and say 150 scale is adequate for us to do preliminary review, but we want to see final site plans at 1 inch equals 100 feet. And that would be appropriate because there are more details that you look at in final. Need to be determined whether or not to waive the requirement to show the location of all existing structures within 500 feet as part of the preliminary site plan. You can still require it for final, but if that's something you don't feel is necessary for preliminary, you can waive it. Need to determine if a traffic impact statement is necessary for preliminary review. Even by default, it's required for final. Personally, I do like to have that question front-loaded, but the zoning ordinance has it the other way. Need to determine if a statement of use is necessary. So this is a special land use and a preliminary and a planned unit development and a site plan all bundled up, and special land use is required, that statement of use. That's something that you could require as preliminary review or later on as final. You'll need to determine if the parallel plan is reasonably feasible. You'll need to determine, and these are the criteria for the developmental standard modifications, so the lot size and lot and setbacks and those types of things are if the modifications are consistent with sound planning and design, are necessary for the preservation of significant features or open space on the site, or are otherwise necessary to result in a higher quality design. You'll need to determine if the criteria for additional lots have been satisfied. Again, there were 3 that they have said they have designed in. You'll need to determine the open space requirement. And again, there's the option to allow it to be off-site, non-contiguous, or a waiver for reduced. And need to determine if alternative screening would be warranted. That's part of the PUD standards that you can require. And then kind of, in this case, it's the simple one. If the criteria for preliminary site plan, special land use, and planned unit developments are satisfied. There are a number of potential conditions that we have raised from our review. One is the providing a statement of use, that the special land use approval is only effective upon final approval of the other elements, the final site plan and the final planned unit development, that a table should be added with all of the proposed modifications, that the cul-de-sac should be reconfigured so the center is landscaped. So right now they're shown as paved from curb to curb. One of the things that's happening more often is putting an island in there with some landscaping. It just reduces the impervious surface. But that's important. You also need to make sure that the fire trucks can get around and the garbage trucks. Approval by the township engineer and fire inspector. Consideration of changes to the tree species, as I outlined previously. Description of the criteria for residential density bonuses should be added to the site plan, and that could be something that's done for the final site plan or added onto preliminary plan. And the reason why we raise that is it's documenting here are the things that we're committing to do, and the site plan is basically the document that everyone looks to in the future to see what was supposed to happen. Minor correction for the open space calculations. The math there puts a limit on the upland contribution, but there isn't any. And the additional information about the area for stormwater basins. And then the one thing that we're recommending, because of the complexity of this, is conducting a pre-application meeting with township staff. So that would be Mr. Nicholson, the planner, me, your engineer, and other interested parties, perhaps the road commission or school district or the utility operators. And the reason why we recommend this is for something this complex and for any project, it reduces the amount of times that it would have to come here, because a lot of the the technical details can be sorted out and the applicant can prepare a plan that's more consistent with the zoning ordinance. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you for your patience. Like I said, it is complex. I'm sorry about the 27 pages, but it's complex. Your zoning ordinance is complex, and I wanted to try to document everything both for this body and for the members of the public and the applicants.
Thanks, Zach. I think you explained your interpretation of the ordinance on the access part. That was my biggest question. Let's see, Kurt, I don't know if you had specific questions.
I don't think so. I think Zach pretty much wrapped up most of what issues we need to do, and they're pretty much laid out there. You will give the applicant a chance to talk to.
I don't know, Ronnie, do you have any comments at this time regarding it? Or?
No.
All right, yeah. I know we can't conduct a formal business
Right.
on it, but just wanted to ask in case there was. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, one comment I had is on the end of the road here, like Zach mentioned in his review is.
Fire chief also talked to me, he'd like to see a cul-de-sac at the end of the.
Okay, so you're aware.
Yes,
that was
he's
the-
also contacted me, asked the same thing, can we put a cul-de-sac at the end of Valencia? Yes, we can.
Okay. So this time, Kurt,
Yeah.
Chad, I don't know if you have
We'll
other.
defer any decision on it until the point in time we have a quorum
Yeah,
to vote.
absolutely, yeah. I guess, Zach, if you're ready, we could move to old business item number 2 and go through that review. And once again, unfortunately, we cannot make a decision and act upon it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so up next is for DeRocha. This is a major amendment of a previously approved special land use and site plan for an open storage yard, contractor's yard. Let me get here. So, for those of you not familiar with all these fancy pants planning and zoning terms, special land use is a use that's permitted, but because of the nature of the use, it may cause greater impacts on the surrounding area, and so it gives the township a bit more discretion in conditions, and if it determines it may have a significant negative impact, it can say not in this location. So that's what a special land use is versus something by right, where if you come in and you tick the boxes, it gets approved. So the planning commission reviews special land uses and site plans and makes a recommendation to the township board for the final approval. So we're at that initial planning commission review. The property's at 7079 Old US 23. It's on the west side of Old US 23. This would be an expansion on the southern portion of the property that had been wooded, as you see up there, but it has been cleared in anticipation of this project. The original approvals were granted in 2018 with the condition that gravel driveway would be paved within 2 years. Let's see. It is within the PCI planned commercial industrial district, which is consistent with the future land use area. And this use is as mentioned earlier, a special land use in that zoning district. Of note, to the north along the expansion area, the west of the expansion area, and south of the expansion area are properties that are currently zoned FR, farming residential. And as part of this use, the Planning Commission has the discretion to require larger buffers than the base that are in the zoning district for this use if it determines it's necessary to protect those uses. All right. We already talked about the trees on there. Under area width, height, and setbacks, and I'm on page 6 now. The proposed amendment would be consistent with these setbacks. The couple of no's on there are for existing structures that are legally non-conforming. There would be no changes to them as part of this, so there are no issues with these setbacks. For access and circulation, it'll be continued to be accessed from the west from Old US 23 with the driveway in a similar location, but the driveway as part of this project will be paved and curbs will be added. Let's see. Off-street parking and loading. For the employee parking, there will be no changes. The expansion area will continue to be the gravelled. And this is a discussion we had previously that this type of use isn't exactly described in the uses in the zoning ordinance, which happens occasionally from time to time. But there's a process where the township can determine that this is a similar use, and when that happens, you're supposed to meet all the standards for that similar use. For this one, in 2018, the recommendation was to selectively apply the standards for open storage yards. Open storage yards generally require paving of all outdoor storage areas, but that was not required in 2018 as part of the original approval. So even though it wasn't necessarily well documented, it appears that that requirement was not selected of them. But again, the outdoor storage area will be consistent with what's on there currently and what was previously approved. There are a couple of areas where it will be brought in where it has meandered into the side yard setbacks. It's not likely to require any additional essential services. A stormwater management system is going to be added. That's for the township engineer to approve. For landscaping and screening, and I had not had a chance to review the plan that was just received a couple of days ago, but the most recent plan called for planting 46 evergreens along the northern lot line with a berm roughly 5 feet high. For those of you without experience, trees are really good at blocking visual, but not necessarily sound. The berm will be much more effective at blocking sound. At the previous meeting, October 12th, there was a lot of discussion and potential interest from the Planning Commission about requiring a berm along the western boundary as well to reduce sound migration in that direction. And that could be a condition that the Planning Commission could require as part of approval. Again, it's a special land use, and you want to mitigate the impacts of that from the surrounding properties. One thing, the current proposed berm isn't consistent with the standards. Primarily, it doesn't have a 2-foot flat top, but the Planning Commission can grant a waiver from that. The berm standards are, if you read them, they're designed for pretty berms out in the front of commercial areas, whereas this berm is mostly to block sound and sight. For lighting, one of the things that we want to raise up is there's no proposed lighting with the amendment. The site plan doesn't show existing lighting, but in my couple of drives through there later at night, it's fairly obvious that there is light on the site, and a lot of it is going up. So our recommendation is to add that lighting, and any lighting that's not consistent be removed or replaced. There are no signs. There was a sign there, but it's been removed. For open storage yards, there are setbacks. As mentioned, there are residential areas on the northern, western, and southern lot lines of the expansion. The Planning Commission may increase those setbacks if it's necessary to manage any impacts on those residential areas. Access will be paved will have direct access onto a paved principal arterial in the current area. The staging areas will meet the required yard setbacks. They've described the materials that they'll be storing on there. It's consistent with what they're storing out there now. Screening, once again, was the big conversation topic at the last Planning Commission meeting, principally to the north and to the west of the expansion area. We don't believe they're displaying any products on site. Most of the site is behind a berm and existing buildings. Let me scroll through here. The site meets the minimum dimensions for the zoning district, and we recommend the township does collect a performance guarantee for landscaping and other improvements that would be required. And I will forego the decision criteria unless there are special questions on that, since I'm not deciding it. I will go through the determinations. This is starts on page 14. So the planning commission should determine if the proposed landscaping will provide adequate screening from adjacent residential properties, especially to the north and west. Those were a big discussion at the last meeting. Planning commission should determine if the proposed berm should receive a waiver from having to comply with all the design standards, slope and flat top. Planning commission should determine if increased setbacks are necessary to mitigate any impacts on residential uses along the northern, western, and southern lot lines. So as part of this use, the planning commission could say the minimum setbacks for the district aren't adequate, you need to increase it. That hasn't been discussed too much in previous ones, but didn't seem to be interested in making those larger. And the planning commission should determine if the applicant has demonstrated that all activities and storage will be contained within the site in order to waive the requirement to provide fencing along the rear and side lot lines. So for this use, kind of the built-in standard is that you need to put fences around it, but if the planning commission makes a determination that activities will be contained, it can waive that requirement. The site plan does not call for a fence along those areas, nor did the previous approval. A couple of conditions, I'll touch on the more interesting ones, that the existing lighting should be added, and any lighting not consistent with the zoning ordinance should be removed or replaced. The potential for the berm along the western lot line to mitigate sound. The performance guarantee, and if any of those waivers above are not granted, the site plan should be changed to address what wasn't met. That's what I got.
Thank you. Is there any comments from the applicant? New items or speak about?
We're going to defer the substance, most of our discussion for the next time, but just we did want to kind of go on record about this additional berm on the west property line and buffering this residential property. I mean, there's acres of woods between us and it's a quarter of a mile to the next neighbor to the west. Jerry DeRocher is not in favor of this consideration, and we're hoping for your consideration on that item. Other than that, there's some lighting. This thing about the lighting, which is new. There's some lighting on the barn. General lighting. So I guess we can show it. I'm not sure what the issue is really here.
If I can. So, yep, that's the switch to standard time away from daylight savings, as I get to drive past it now at 7. And there seems to be there's up lighting on the trees, or at least there's lighting that's been illuminating the trees on the site.
Well, there's lights like you would have on a barn, and to light up around the building for people going in and out early and late in the day. But we certainly can show their location on the plan. I don't see an issue with that. And then we did, beyond that, we are asking for a slight modification to the hours of operation that we originally proposed to be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Because in this type of business, it's early to rise and early to work. There's a lot of timetables involved with getting materials to job sites. 7 a.m. just isn't realistic. So we're willing, we'll ask for your consideration on that as well. So beyond that, I'll defer any more comments or discussion till next time.
Yeah, just the item on that, if you could update on the plans, that those times that you're requesting. So it's clear here, right, the latest version is 7 to 6. So, if you're requesting the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., just document it on the land use statement.
Yeah.
Just a number to change it, that's just a
I
minor
thought
thing.
that I did that on our, but we definitely will do that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, yeah, and then, I guess, appreciate your comments, I was just making sure I'm interpreting the latest print you sent. This berm continues around here, or am I interpreting that incorrectly? Around this corner in this latest version? It appears that the berm continues now to the lot line. Is that correct?
There is a berm on the easterly section. The berm is around the pond is partly because of the embankment for the pond itself.
Yeah.
Depending on where you're standing, and it extends up above the top of the pond, that's right where you're pointing there, if that's you
Okay.
pointing at it.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it from the neighbor's point of view, we're actually pretty high up off the ground there. It drops off. So it's something like 8, 9, 10 feet high above the ground there. So that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, thanks, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm
Sure.
viewing. Thanks. Kurt, I don't know if you have any questions for them for now?
No, I think that covers about all of it.
If I may add,
Yeah.
the 7, I just scrolled up in here, hours of operation before 7 a.m. for loading and unloading are outside the zoning ordinance standards. So 2205 P4, outdoor storage material, has a sentence that goes, all loading and unloading of materials for storage shall occur in these designated areas and are limited to between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. So hours outside of that require some other approval beyond what this body is able to do. It doesn't mean the business can't be open, it just means stuff can't be loaded and unloaded.
One point of clarification on that. Generally speaking, it's not a loading and unloading operation going on at that time. It's drivers arriving, getting in their trucks and leaving the site. That's what we mean by the start of operation. That loading would have been done, the day before, or at the gravel pit. That's
Yep.
the.
So what I would recommend is for revisions, is to have it clear that these are the hours of operation and here's the hours when loading is going to happen. That can be approved.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. Anything, Chet, any questions?
Not at the moment.
We can move to new business, item number 1, Amy shared private driveway. Maybe just go through that, Zach.
All right.
This is the first time it's at the planning commission for
And may I ask, Mr. Niemi here, do you have finish in your blood?
Yeah, I'm full finish.
Okay, I'm only half on my mom's side, but I saw that combination of vowels, and that's got to be finished there. All right, so the request is for a shared private driveway to support a land division. There's a parcel that's going to be divided because of the geometry. Both parcels couldn't have direct access from existing road. For shared private driveways, they can provide access up to 4 single-family lots, condominium units, non-residential buildings with a maximum length of 1,200 feet. This one would provide access for 2 single-family lots. It would have direct access from Indian View, which is an existing private road. On to page 2. You can see there where the property is. The proposed private drive would go along the southern side of that, from the cul-de-sac roughly. For zoning, we just kind of bring that in there to bring folks to attention. The proposed divisions, although it's not a part of this application, are generally consistent with the standards of the current zoning district and with the future land use. For private road expansion, I'm on page 4 now. I'm doing this a bit quickly. The existing private road has a length of roughly 1,008 feet. That's from center to the north. It provides access for 9 lots. Currently, it'd be 10 with the division. There are limits placed on the expansion of existing private roads, including the length and the number of lots. The number of lots that would be provided is going to be below the 30, so that's okay. However, private roads with a single access point have a maximum length of 1,200 feet, including the length of any shared driveway. The township, however, can allow a greater length if a dry hydrant system is installed. So when you do the math, the proposed length from Indian View to the end of the shared driveway would be 1,517 feet, which is greater than the 1,200 feet. So it would require this body to say you can go longer, put a dry hydrant. And for those of you not familiar, dry hydrants are basically ponds with a pipe that goes in. The fire department can hook up their truck and suck the water out in case of an emergency. So that's a decision point, is allowing the longer length. And we defer details on that to the township engineer and the fire department. For shared private driveway approvals, a lot of these it was difficult for us to provide a lot of feedback on because the plans are in a very rough state. It includes some information like the setbacks or like the right-of-way for the easement or the width of the easement, and that's consistent. There has been a draft maintenance agreement that's been provided. There are some tweaking that would be required for that to make sure it's a recordable document. And there's some specific terms that need to be included, that who has the access rights and things that utilities can go in there. So for access rights, I can cross on here, and delivery folks and families and friends, those type of things. So a little bit of tweaking to those documents that were provided. For shared driveway designs, this is the meats and potatoes of it. There aren't a lot of engineering details, so again, it's difficult to provide strong feedback. We will need to have a cross-section. There's a description of it, but we need to know the cross-section. Oh, is that any additional there?
We do have a cross-section, I know for sure. I think that there's some additional detail on the site plan.
Okay.
Hoping that I remember to send it.
So one of the things is that if you have an access point nearby, you want one of them to be closed. We're not aware of Mr. Niemi having an adjacent access point, so that's not an issue. There needs to be drainage provided. There aren't any details on that.
I think Rob should have that. I was out there and
Right, that's in the packet, that was that.
Drainage of that driveway, and I've shown where the culverts are on the existing driveway, whether there would be a proposed third culvert. So I
Is this that?
yeah, so the driveway that's shown there, I had installed for the initial front property there with a waiver exempt form and, from the county and stuff like that. So that driveway is currently in place. It's showing the elevations of where the driveway is with the ditch depths on each side. Black arrows are showing how the water drains currently on the property.
Yeah, so some of my apologies on this. The report was on November 4th, and I believe additional information came November 8th. So this is hot off the presses. So it sounds like there's more information for drainage. The exact detail and management is defer to the township engineer. The main thing is we want to make sure that it's not causing stormwater runoff onto adjacent properties. The easement width is the 66-foot that's required. Minimum finished surface needs to be 20 feet. Does the new information have details on that?
Oh, we do have a cross section.
Okay.
Here, let's see.
There's this.
Oh, yeah, it shows 20.
All right. The one asterisk to that would be that if a dry hydrant is installed along the shared driveway, that it needs to have 26 feet at least bump outs. So, and the idea is that the truck can be parked there sucking water without blocking access for other equipment. Trying to see here if it needs to be load-bearing surface, so not necessarily the entire 26-foot width paved. That's something that could be worked out with the fire department and the township engineer. Pretty basic construction materials needs to be at least 6 inches of gravel or paving on top of that. The maximum length, so the length of the proposed shared private driveway is less than the 1,200 feet and provide access to less than 4 lots. But it's the expansion of the existing private road where it goes over that 1,200 feet. It's not proposing any turnarounds. Turnarounds are only required if there are more than 3 dwelling units. There would only be 2. We do note that would mean the person on the westernmost property would likely have to drag their garbage tote out to the cul-de-sac. But turnarounds are not required. Intersection design standards. When we did the review, we didn't have clear design, but it has to intersect with 90 degrees roughly. That shouldn't be a challenge with the cul-de-sac. There's no challenge with intersection offsets from other streets. The plans that we had didn't have information about vertical clearance, and I'm not sure if you recall the 2 shared private driveways we did previously. They basically had a note on the plans that said we shall maintain vertical clearance at least 15 feet above the driveway, and that's something that could be easily added to plans. For only 2 houses, we defer to the traffic engineer if any traffic control signs, stop or yield, would be required. For 2, it may be a bit of overkill, but we defer to the engineers on that. There is an authority to modify some of the review requirements for the shared private road. The plans that we had didn't have a lot of information, so we weren't able to provide guidance on what may need to be modified. And it's not a conversion of a private driveway to a private road. The thing that we note is future surveys should show setbacks as described in here. So the front setback would be from the shared private driveway. For adjacent properties, there is what appears to be another shared private driveway immediately south of this, and your zoning ordinance kind of directs folks to see if it's possible to use that, and we're not sure if the applicant has contacted them or not. If permission is granted, it would provide access to 4 lots, which is the maximum you can do for a shared driveway. There may be some upgrades for turnarounds or those types of things. Let's see, it's not a non-conforming shared private driveway. So those are the quick elements that we have. It sounds like the revised plan has more information. The big question will be the length of 1,200 feet from center along Indian View to the end of it. There is the option for the township to prove that greater length if dry hydrants are installed. And that's my quick review.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. Kurt? Questions, comments? for the applicant? I know we can't, we have to have more meetings on this one. Still ask questions.
Well, because the question is 300 feet long, that
Yeah.
is provided for in the ordinance.
Yes, question, have you approached I don't know who owns the
I had approached the front neighbor, I had seen him on the road, Jack. I had asked him if that would be an option. He kind of hemmed and hawed, and I didn't want to cause any issues, so I figured that since I had this driveway coming in to service the front part of it along that route there, that would just be a trunk for the shared driveway as well.
But to know Jack is the only one, Mark, that you ask about that. Because I'm the property owner right here behind Township. Mark and I have had discussion, minor discussion about the drive. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. This was the only thing, my question is, could that alleviate conflict? But maybe it's better to do as you're proposing, to have its own separate one.
I just have a question in regards to the dry hydrant portion.
Yeah.
Like we had mentioned, there's a shared driveway just by it there, and there's not any pond surfacing that shared driveway. So is that necessary, or is that something that we can go away from, having to create a pond on the property?
Well, my understanding is the fire department in other locations, and correct me if I'm wrong here, have considered dry hydrants in the area as meeting that.
So as far as the dry hydrant requirement goes, the way that the planning commission has treated in the past is they go with the fire chief's recommendation. And in certain cases, the fire chief says, no, there's adequate turnaround.
Yep.
It's not an access issue. We're not going to actually require the dry hydrant system. And the planning commission has previously indicated that that is sufficient to waive that requirement. Don't know if that's necessarily the way to do it based on how it's written, but we have a lot of examples of that being done.
Yep.
Is that because of turnaround or because of
It's
access to water?
access. It's whether or not the fire truck has adequate access to get back there with a tanker or whatever equipment they use.
I thought I was looking at something that mentioned needing
Footage.
access to a supply of water, even if they had a tanker truck back there, that if you run out of water, you still have to have access to some.
Yeah, that I don't know for sure.
Yeah, so I guess for the applicant, it would maybe be a good idea to reach out and see what their fire chief's assessment is, and that could answer all of our questions regarding that point.
Yep.
That would be good. Chad, Kurt, any
No,
other
I'm good.
questions at this time?
As far as the shared driveway goes, would it alleviate anything if he could use the Reese's shared drive? Like, what benefit would that have?
Well, reason why I suspect it's in there is for access management. So it's common to want to have as few curb cuts as possible on roads.
Okay.
And so if there's an opportunity to use an existing curb cut. The township has an interest in trying to see if that's available as an option. In this case, it's far less pressing because it's a private road with limited houses. That's not going to have very many additional houses. There's not through traffic that there are turning conflicts with. So it's just something in there, the zoning ordinance kind of says you should try to do this if possible.
So they really need to check with the fire department.
Yeah.
See what their opinion is on this.
Yeah.
Before we do anything.
Is this in the Fenton Fire Department area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For Center Road and most likely, yeah.
That's it, unless applicant, do you have any more comments? Thank you. We'll move to call to the public.
Relative to Mark's driveway, as a neighbor across the private drive, I'm curious, there's evidence of, on the drawings, of private drive access to parcel A on that split parcel of land. But Mark's driveway ends at parcel B, which Mark, you and I talked about, you know, how maybe your brother's drive would eventually access the property if he built the house. I guess I'm curious is if it's two parcels of land and it's a private drive that has to service eventually two houses, potential houses, why wouldn't the drive have to be shown in at least a preliminary fashion to how it's gonna service parcel B as well?
So if you scroll up, I mean, this black drive is shown because that's really there.
Right.
The blue line's right there, Steve. That's where we'd have to go up to parcel B up top there. So that red line coming through is where a culvert would be to service up. It's real hard to get bad color to sketch there, but you have that yellow line where your culvert is.
Right,
So it drains down, and I put another red culvert
right.
to that blue one there to let it pass through the property just like that.
And I understand and I probably can't do anything about it, but it's just my concern is at the moment is if you get it approved like this, and you and I had the discussion about continuing to run the drive up the lot line, then your brother's drive also kind of ends up right in my front yard. And, you know, we had talked about the potential for maybe it running kind of off towards the back of the property. And since, you know, if it gets approved in this fashion, I'll never have any right, I'm imagining again, to come back and say, wow, I thought you were gonna do something different with that drive. It's just a
Yeah, I mean,
concern.
we gotta work within the 66-foot set off, right? So we gotta keep the driveway in that set off.
Right, but that's, you know, in the woods, 66 foot is nothing. I mean, it's not a subdivision. So, anyway, just a concern.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Any other public comments?
Oh, yes, I do. Daniel Cooper, I have questions on the the Lake Urban. I'm still confused on the shall and the, so if we think of shall as being must, the Tyrone Township ordinance says the PUD must be located so that you can access it from a paved county road, a paved primary county road. I'm not sure, is Zach, is it recommendations that you give? I'm still not sure how, so you give recommendations and your recommendation is that the shall is kind of negated by the
Yeah.
can?
Yeah, well, and not just that, because there are other, and let me see the examples here, but there are other instances of access for specific uses that have very clear language that says you shall have direct access from this, or you shall only have direct access.
But the PUD says you must have from a paved county road access to it.
You must be located so you can have access.
Okay, so they pretty much have to be on a paved county road. Paved county primary road.
What is it?
Just a second, I'm trying to pull up.
Because it's ordinance 11.02E.
Yeah, it's a bad area on the west. Both areas are bad.
Because I know the second plan that they're putting in, that's going to be off of White Lake, and that is a county road. But if they're doing the first one without access to White Lake, that's not a paved primary county road.
Yep, so I'm going to contrast that with this was the language for the special land use, the DeRochers. Storage yards shall have direct access onto a paved principal arterial. So whenever there's weirdness in the plain text, we've looked to see if they're defined terms. And so I included in there, zoning ordinance says shall is mandatory. It doesn't have description for can, but in cases where it's not, we go to the general usage, which I think I used Webster's for that. We also look to previous interpretations, and because this is the first time in this millennium that there's been a plan unit development, we don't have a lot to look at. So when we had the single access point, we looked to what this body had done in the past for is a boulevard a single access point or not. In this case, we looked to language in other places of the zoning ordinance to see, do they all have this language? And in that case, we could go and see how that was interpreted. But all the language for the other ones are much more direct, where it's you shall do this.
Oh, 'cause to me, it sounds very direct that you must have access from a paved county road so that you can get in, so that you can get into it, but must have access, shall have access.
Yeah, and so that's where, try to be gentle with my terms here. It really matters the words that get used in zoning ordinance. And if you add something in one section but you don't add it to another, the interpretation is that you purposely omitted it from this place. And so direct access, because they've put that in other places similar for access and they didn't put it to here, that's where it is a disservice for interpretation. And
I didn't see where there was much of an interpretation of shall, which you said is a must have access,
shall be located so it can have access.
shall be located so that you can have access, okay.
So in the reading of the plain language, it doesn't even necessarily have to have access, but so that it could. Now, this body could go above and beyond as part of its site plan approval and say, we don't think it's safe, or the roads are over capacity, although that's generally an issue with gravel roads. Yeah, you can fit these number of units here, but for these other issues, you don't get approval. So one of the things that's in the back of my mind, I don't think I've told you this, but I'm keeping a list of things in the zoning ordinance that I would change if someone asked me if you had a magical wand, what would you change? And that's usually the next step following a master plan, is you go through and you touch this up really big. Is for uses where the township said, we only want to have access on there. There's very clear language, I've done it for other communities, where access shall only be from this, or primary access shall only be from that. And unfortunately, in this case, it twists in on itself.
So, but they all have the right to determine what the interpretation of those words are, though, correct? Or
Yes,
do you
and
have to
and
go
we
with-
make a recommendation, and then the township board has the final say whether to
Okay, so
listen to our
you get to
recommendation or not.
determine
Yep.
his interpretation
Yep.
is, okay, just checking
Yep,
on how
well,
that
and
works.
so there are additional mechanisms. So there are certain things you've heard here where the planning commission gets to do a determination. There are certain things where the zoning administrator determines in the general administration of this. He and they can take my recommendation or not. But whatever decision or interpretation is made, there's an opportunity to appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with making interpretations when the text is weird or conflicts with other sections, or where it could have multiple meanings. So there is a built-in mechanism. Anyone can appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I've seen cases where the Township Board has done it. I've seen it where the Planning Commission has said, we're not sure what's going on here. ZBA, you tell us. So there are those other mechanisms outside just our interpretation based on our reading of it.
Thanks, Ed. Any other public comments?
Scott Dietrich, White Lake Road. I still got a lot of problems. We're still dealing with a lot of houses there. I know it's preliminary, but do we have to go PUD? I mean, I know that's a determination you guys make. I know we've had several surveys, and we don't want densely populated areas. People have been clear with that, we want larger lots. I don't know if anybody's noticed 23, all the accidents lately. Today, another one. I mean, we can't even get up and down the service drive.
It's a madhouse.
It's a madhouse. We can't-
Constantly.
It's a constant backup. So I don't even care what the township says about traffic studies. What do you guys know? What do you know? You can't get anywhere. And it's crazy. It's stupid to even think about putting that many homes there. Not to mention the screw corks in the ground to support the houses. You know, pylons and stuff. I think, well, just tell them to go down and build in Louisiana, put everything on stilts. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. DeRocher, I go by there every time, it's getting worse. DeRocher is your next asphalt plant, you guys. Go over there, look at all the machinery in there. You might not smell the asphalt, but you can have, look at the trucks they got in there. He keeps piling more crap in there every day.
It's quietly getting bigger and bigger.
Oh, yeah, and you can see, I just drive by and really look in there. He's got portable buildings in there. He's got huge trucks. I mean, these are trucks that are gonna hit our roads. We were all upset about the asphalt plant. You guys better open your eyes about this guy. He was small when he went in there, but I thought I heard him say he's got other companies storing material in there last meeting. Are there trucks gonna be there?
Is he working to what he's been
I don't
allowed to
know
do?
if it's gonna be all his. Last time I got the understanding from what he said that storage of other companies' material, and I'm thinking, are we broadening ourselves off to problems like that? I mean, go by there, he's got big boom trucks, they're right in front, you can see them. You just look at the driveway, it's a mess in there, and we found out last time he hasn't conformed to any of the standards they gave him the last, I don't know, guys, I mean, a small construction business, fine, I think this guy's way too big for this area. I mean, I don't know what he's doing over there. I don't know if Ross has been in there, have you been in there, Ross? I mean, I can see from the satellites, like I said, he's working on all that machinery in there. He's got that big barn. I don't think he's subcontracting out all of his maintenance work. So, I mean, we're talking DEQ, we're talking all the DNR agencies looking for what he's doing in there for oil, fluids, Not to mention the traffic in that area. You get behind, you're down there, you got all these big trucks going in there. And he's got a lot of them. How many trucks is he gonna have? How many businesses are operating in there? How many businesses are putting stuff in there? How many trucks are his? That's a lot of questions we need to know. 'Cause I think that's next. I mean, we don't want to stop people from having business, don't get me wrong. But I know outside storage was a big issue when they did the master plan last time. They were really concerned about somebody just keeping piling stuff on a lot. And I just think that's way too much, what he's doing in there. So, other than that, I think the traffic issues and I think that's gonna be a big issue. I think you guys really gotta keep an eye on that.
If I, sorry, Scott, if
Yeah,
I can
you're
add
fine.
just a general observation, and it may just be me and my family, but along with the traffic thing and all that stuff, it seems, I attended a number of meetings relative to the 72 acres over here with the development with Blue Sky and Mr. Boss and stuff that I think is, I've asked Ross a lot of questions. Seems like it's kind of quieted down and nothing happening right now, but I get the impression, and maybe it's just because this is a small and not a very densely populated county and township, it seems like there's a lot of somewhat larger entities that try to get stuff done in this township, and it seems like there's a lot of handiwork that people try to slide like under the table or behind a door or behind a curtain, and then when they end up in meetings with you folks or with the board, there's a lot of, oh, gee, we didn't know that, or gee, that's not what was discussed last time, or wow, we don't know how that happened. And just as a citizen and having been a business person for many years, it seems interesting to me that people who are wanting to spend a lot of money in this township seem to struggle to, this sounds simplistic, but seems like they struggle to follow the rules or even understand the rules, and they present stuff over and over and over and keep failing, and they act like, gee, I don't know how that happened. So I get the impression that either they think there are a lot of people that are very stupid in the township, or that we don't care, or I don't know how to put it, but I just made that observation from spending some time with other community members, and I don't know how you convince people who have a lot of money to spend here that the people here aren't stupid and we're not ignorant, and that they need to do their due diligence just like anyone else would do. And I know it's a general comment, but it goes along with a lot of the other upheaval that it seems like with the road and the lack of repairs being made and other stuff. And the DeRocher thing is I noticed too, for the last 3 years, whatever, that used to be a house along the road that somebody owned, and all of a sudden a berm was built in front along Old 23, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I tell myself, who's approving all that activity? Anyway, sorry, but that's just,
Thanks for your comment.
yeah.
Anyone else?
I would like to add to the DeRocher thing. My name is Elizabeth. I live in the property that is just north of them. They are not following the rules about their business hours. I even caught them even last night at 9 p.m. out there with their equipment. I have caught them on several occasions, mostly on Friday nights. Even the night after the last planning committee meeting, they were out there from, I don't know when, but I know that every hour I kept looking over there. They were out there even after 4 a.m. in the morning still working.
And who polices that?
Nobody.
Township's supposed to.
If we receive a complaint, we do follow up. We have not received a single written complaint
Does that have to be
We
written?
have received one complaint, it was sent
We
by my
did,
cousin on
to
my
the
behalf.
planning commission, correct, but we do need to have the formal complaint. We have a process. All we need is a form filled out, and then we can take action. But we need to do that so that we can treat everyone fairly.
Yep.
That's the only way that we can proceed.
Ross, where do you go to file that?
There's a complaint form right on the homepage.
Yeah.
Right on the right-hand side, you can print that out, you can fax it in, you can email it in, you can drop it off in the Dropbox.
And Ross, you know what, that's a good point, because I was on the site last night looking for the package for today. And I did see that complaint form, and just, again, as somebody in the community, I know I walk across the lot and ask you a lot of questions, but that's a good point. If there's stuff that people are really concerned about, that's probably a good way to document
Absolutely.
for these guys.
We don't have a-
Ross, and to have a documentation from a number of people that, and I'm just thinking about it now.
Yeah.
So they don't have to self-report at all? Like, I remember the wedding barn had
They
to
do if that is a condition, yes.
Oh, only, okay.
If I may add, my experience in many communities is with certain approvals, people will ask at meetings, well, who's going to police this? Who's going to? And my answer is, you live next door to it, you're going to know if something's happened, and you're going to call us, because we're not out driving around for code enforcement stuff at 9 or 10.
But you can't call, you need to write it.
Right, so- and-
Email it or fill out the form.
Yep, and
Because then a lot of people have the documentation, right?
And
So that's a good point.
I had, in a community where I was staff planner, we had a development agreement with the builder that said they're going to use a certain route to get to their subdivision. They weren't going to drive through the other subdivision they just developed. They're going to go around the county road and get there. And they kept having trucks driving through there. And the neighbors were quite furious. They said, we want you here doing code enforcement 24/7. I'm like, we're a department of 1 1/4. We have to do zoning permits and all these other things too. We can't sit there on the off chance that a truck's going to drive by sometime on Tuesday. But what we told them is you can do is we need to have something, if it comes to it, that we can sit down in front of a judge and say, here's proof they were breaking what they did. And so we worked with them and said, we can't be out there 24 hours a day, but if you guys take pictures with date and time stamp, get a bigger picture of the truck driving through so we can see here are the houses, and a zoomed in picture so we can see the dot number, we can take action on that. And whenever a truck would go through, we would get a series of 5 groups of pictures. We could watch the truck at the front of the subdivision, in the middle of the subdivision, all the way to the back of the subdivision. And we never saw them do this because it's so rare to get a truck, but because of that, we were able to take action, and they ended up having to put someone sitting on a chair in the front of the road to make sure the trucks didn't go through. So there are things that you can document that will help them, because things happening outside of office hours are really hard to do. So there are ways that you can help with that.
Here's one thing, but Ross, I'll tell you, Ross is a good person to work with, very knowledgeable. You need to get in there. We already know there's several violations, there's several things that they didn't do when they got approved. You brought it up in the last meeting. I think they're asking for something. I think people need to go in there, your board members, they can pick that place apart.
Planning commission can do that as part of the review.
Yeah, I think we should pick it apart. I think we can get better pictures overhead of what's going on there, because I brought them up, and like I said, I don't want it to turn into a junkyard. And, like we've already seen places, you see them on the news all the time where these guys poison everything, walk away, and the township and the community has to clean it up. So, we don't want that. So we gotta protect ourselves.
Yes, sir.
My name's Steve Hasbrook. I live at 8038 Fawcett Road. I would encourage the planning commission members to go look at those sites if you're going to be reviewing these. At least a couple people. You don't all maybe have to go, but somebody should have went there and looked at that. Has anybody been there at all?
What?
The Rocher.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, which one specifically. Yeah, I believe many of us have been there. I don't know if
Have you
we've been
been in
inside
the
the
site?
property, but I have.
You know, I drive by there all the time, and it's been clear to me the whole time that, you know, they can afford to put pavement in the site, and that should be mandatory. Hard surface is where you need to keep machines, especially when you're working on them.
So you can clean up after yourself if you got a spill or anything.
The storm system is almost useless unless you got pavement with good catch basins and a way to control spills. If it goes onto the dirt, which they'll have spills in there pretty regular with that many vehicles and equipment, and it'll just get contaminated into the soils, and they have almost nothing in their site plan for spill containment with their fuel containers and stuff like that. That all needs to be dealt with at this level now, not somebody else is going to do it. Eagle's not going to come look at that. This board is tasked with doing that. There's been no engineering review of this, which I just can't believe that it's not been sent to the engineer for some added input. You guys need to get as much information as you can so that you can make a good decision on these projects. I'm not anti-development. I just would like to see things done properly. And the comment the planner was talking about shall, that is very clear, and it's defined in the front of the zoning ordinance that shall means shall. Doesn't, you know, the other one is what's vague. Of course, you know, when it comes to a special use for the construction yard, that can only be up there, you know, along Old 23. So that's on a Class A primary road clearly. So maybe that's why the wording's different for that. But, you know, there shouldn't be any question about Lake Urban, about, you know, that just says shall, that's what they need to do. You know, I was really surprised when I seen that was being proposed as a PUD. And we have had a PUD in this township not that long ago, and it's Irish Hills. And that's on Old 23, and it's a PUD, and it's on a primary road. Shall have access, and it does. And, you know, you got 3 commissioners here tonight. That's ridiculous. You know, where's everybody else at? Do you have 7 currently?
Yep.
Where are they at? Last time I came, you had 4 and no planners, so, you know, it kind of changed a little bit, but people need to take, you know, enough concern to be here at these meetings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I second that, because I've been to a number of meetings, and I've never seen a full accompaniment of people sitting up there ever at a planning commission meeting or at a board meeting. I've never seen every member. And it's not like you have meetings every night. So I don't know people's extenuating.
Anybody else? Public comment? Janet, go ahead.
Thank you. Diane, thank you for bringing up all of those things that you brought up as well. And I just wonder, when does the intent of the people who wrote these ordinances and master plan, et cetera, when does that become important? Because clearly what you were saying, that's what they intended it to be. So let's not try and like all this legalese. I get it. It can be interpreted differently and has been. There's probably precedent for it. But at some point we have to say, this is what the people wanted. That's why we have a master plan. That's what they wanted. So that's just one point. The other one, you know, well, you take pictures, I agree we should be watching as neighbors, et cetera, but I also don't want to see us turned into these residents that spy on each other and on other, you know, companies and things. You guys it's your job. You need to find out what they're doing, and if they're doing it illegally, it will be helpful if people can send things in, but it shouldn't be, I don't think, in my opinion, should not be our responsibility as residents to be the ones to have to report that, especially when it's been brought up at meetings to say, I mean, now you guys know, you know that this guy, you've known for a while, this guy's not operating the way that he said that he's supposed to be. So that's one thing. Another thing here, I've got several people online, and this is where Zoom would come in handy, because there are people out there with concerns and questions, and if I can just tell you a couple of them, there's a lot of concern for the wildlife in there, the eagles, what's the snake?
Oh,
I'm not a snake fan.
the-
Masaga, but I understand, they all work with the ecosystem and everything. What is the talk around all of that? I haven't heard much about the environmental talk. And so anyway, that's a big concern as I look through here and see people's comments. Also, again, people are really upset that there's only 3 people here. Not you guys' fault, but guess what? A lot of us have things to do. And that these guys back here coming here to hear possibly a decision being made, now they gotta come back again. So I'd be curious to know, when did we know that there wasn't a quorum? And should we have let, like these young gentlemen back here know, you know what, there's not gonna be a decision tonight, don't bother coming. That kind of thing. So that would be helpful. And then one more thing. What is the update on the idea of a master planning roadmap? The clerk said, you heard this earlier before, and I've heard it as well. The clerk said they have already approved $10,000 this fiscal year for master planning. When will that get started? What are the next steps? And again, why are we've been told since February, we want your help, we ask, and we can't, and we understand it's not you guys, we understand it's gotta come from the top, but we need you to go to bat for us too. We wanna help, we wanna work, you don't need $10,000 to help us, or for us to help you do these things. Anyway, that's the point. And also, same person says, sounds like we have a lot of ordinances to fix. You write better ordinances and stick to them instead of catering to them. And that's, again, please advocate for us and tell them that we want Zoom meetings. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Anybody else? Public comment? All right, we'll go to miscellaneous business, and topic we wanted to discuss, Zach, is, and obviously it's one that has been brought up multiple times, is the master plan. And we brought this up in previous meetings. Obviously, our last meeting, we didn't get to it as we went very late, but I don't know where we're at, like what type of information you have been able to gather yet, or the one question I had is, are there things that you have ready, like surveys that have specific questions that kind of gauge the intent of the public, or the will of the public, right? I don't know whether or not you have those things available or not.
Yeah, so what I'll say is some of these questions are a bit above my pay rate, but as a consultant, we generally don't start creating billables for a community until they say, go spend money and time. And so we haven't gotten that formal thing yet, but we do have some idea of where the process is and what's going to be involved. I will say 10,000 is on the low side for most master plans. Especially if you guys want something similar.
I'm not sure that that's the budget. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
In fact, I can say it's probably not.
So as far as kind of off the stock stuff, we do try to tailor surveys to the individual communities, but we do have some kind of categories of questions that we start with, so it's not on a blank page. My understanding, and what I can do is I can talk with the folks who are more knowledgeable on preparing the packages for this, is there's a lot of interest in having a community survey that anyone can use and participate in, that there's interest in having community meetings. And so, like, give you an idea, the survey, we could do it very simple, just online, boom. We can also have it as a hard copy. It can be 2 pages, it can be 20 pages. There's a point where we found where around 10 to 15 minutes people stop trailing off. For the community meetings, workshops.
Yes.
There are lots of different variations on that. The more robust is you could have a workshop just on residential issues, where everyone comes in who wants to talk about residential issues. You can have one just on transportation, one on infrastructure, one on agriculture, or you could just have one and each corner of the room is doing something. The more meetings, obviously, the more energy, the more effort. But the more detailed the feedback you get, so you'll have a better shaped document and policy for what the community needs. Timeline is also something that's very generally from start to finish. A year is a pretty tight window because there are lots of built-in time delays where even once you get a finished document, you have to prove it for distribution and then you have to sit on it for 2 months. Actually 63 days, where that magical number came from, I don't know, but so about a year is pretty tight, especially for a more robust master plan. A community I'm helping finish up with theirs right now, it's been 2.5 years they've been working on it. Now that's a bit slow because they've been doing it mostly on themselves. So what I believe would be most beneficial is we can prepare something saying, survey here kind of the range of options. For community workshops, here kind of the range of options, how long it would take, the likely cost for them, and here's a really tight schedule and here's a longer schedule. As an elected official, I like things when they go over multiple budget years because the impact is a little bit less. So that's something that I'm also naturally aware of myself. So that's what I think would be most beneficial to bring for the next meeting is kind of that range of packages. And as I recall from our last meeting, the last time we discussed it, the planning commission was going to be kind of the steering body in charge of the process.
Yeah, and so one thing I would ask is there examples of surveys, right? 5-page, a 10-page, a 20-page that we could review and then as a planning commission say, we recommend using this form. And then it can go to the township board and they say, yes, we agree with that, let's go. And then that way we could review that. It's a starting point. It's no, I think we have to start somewhere.
But the community needs to be involved. The last survey was horrible.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, this is.
I know, but.
So the surveys, right, would be where it would have to be similar to what we did. It wouldn't be opened up to the Michigan population. It would be Tyrone Township residents, and obviously that's my point of saying, hey, let's review what survey options we have in an open meeting like this, and then we have community
workshops do that.
So, yeah. But for the survey specifically, I think that would be good, and then we could move on it from that point.
Yeah, what I guess we'd like to see is we need to look at January as the kickoff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that should be enough time to get some of the things put together that we need to get the ball rolling.
Yep.
We know we need focus group workshop, whatever you want to call it. I guess we need to take a look and see how many we think we need, what topics we think we need to cover, and basically how the planning commission is going to help you develop the master plan for us. The budget, we can work on that later. We know what we need, so we need to look at the costs of that at the point in time we get an idea of what we're going to go on. Because, I understand people's frustration. They want to be able to see some sort of a timeline. And, I'm not going to make excuses for timelines, but the fact is we've gone through in the past year we've had 3 chairmen for the planning commission, okay? We've also gone through 5 or so new members. That doesn't make things any easier either.
because there's not a lot of continuity to fall back on for what we did in the last process. So, this is going to be a learning process, not only for the community, but for the planning commission as we walk through it. So, our intent, because the planning commission and Rich will be quarterbacking this for the community and the township. So we need to get the game plan ready to roll here. Yeah, I think it would be difficult to start anything in December. So
Yep.
By the time we got everything ready, it's tough enough some days to get everybody here. But I think that the interest that people have in putting this together, I know we've got Genoa Township is putting theirs together. I know the city of Linden is putting theirs together. I know Rose Township is putting theirs together. So I know that there's a lot of folks in the area who are putting new plans together. Actually, it helps us to be a little later in the process, since if we know what some of the other people are putting in their plans, we can use their information to dovetail with our plan. So if we know that there's going to be an asphalt plant in Rose Township, okay, where do we stand on that kind of situation? That's not going to happen, so I just, it was simply,
We blew it, Kurt.
no, it was simply a comparison, but it helps us to know what's going on around us before we actually put all the stuff together. So that will, I would guess, at least from my perspective, help me to think about what would make this a smarter process for us. We don't need to invent the wheel, we need to make the wheel better. And that's the way I guess I want to kind of look at this process. And everybody's going to be new in the process. So if we look for a period of focus groups that go for, I don't know, 90 days or however long you think is it a one-time shot? Do we have 2 or 3 meetings on commercial? Do we have a couple on, the different focuses? And then how do we bring all of the pieces together into a final document? Because we're not going to draft a document, you're going to do that.
That's what you pay me for, yeah.
Yeah, and then Zach, and Ross maybe, has the notice for the
We
intent?
have it ready. Well, we have the list ready, we just need to put together, we have plenty of examples. It's just a template.
Of what?
Notice of intent to plan to get sent out to adjacent communities.
Okay, yeah, so is that something that we could send out in December?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that would be good to do.
Just a thought in relation to focus groups and Kurt, some of your comments. You may want to think about as time develops and you, the community along with board members and stuff, like start to maybe gather and get together. There may be a couple different times where maybe it would help to bring in like a professional, like a facilitator that, I'm thinking about automotive stuff, but like a facilitator who can help direct. If you end up having a room full of 40 or 50 people, and you got everybody kind of like we're doing, like yelling our own comments, if you get somebody that can help direct, you're doing focus groups, and say you have 3 different groups of people here, you've got somebody that can keep.
Yeah, we got folks.
Do you?
That are very
that
good at
can
that.
keep people, on focus to
Yeah,
what their intent is, and it
Zach
may help.
has.
Okay, it may help you guys. Okay,
Yeah.
and it may help everybody get through the process, in an expedient manner and.
Yeah. In fact, I personally, we have folks who do this a lot and are very good. My
Do you?
experience and
Good.
background to it is one of the best and most useful classes I had in architecture school wasn't related to design or structure or any of that stuff. It was basically how to talk to clients. And so the premise is, if you're an architect and someone comes to you and says, I want you to design a house, it's not very useful to ask them, tell me what you want in your house, because most folks don't have the language to describe it well. They'll say so many square feet, so many bedrooms, open plan, and plank walls or whatever. So it was really emphasizing you have to ask questions to get the information that people are able to share. Like how often do you have relatives over? Do you have any hobbies? Do you like to cook or eat out, and those types of things. So that's kind of the approach we have, is you have to ask around.
Would it be, I'm sorry, would it be possible for you guys and the supervisor of the board to sit down and actually have a plan that says we're gonna start, we're gonna do this is what we're gonna do, you're gonna be given this task?
That's what the intent is.
Oh, yes, that's what we've been wanting, thank you.
Shall we,
Project
or
plan.
shall?
Yes.
You shall have a meeting.
Shall we have
Yeah, so Zach, is our request clear?
Yep,
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
make
I
sure
can bring
we-
something for December.
my question is, shall we have a budget before the first of the year?
Hold on, Scott.
All right.
Public comments closed.
Again, we're trying, we gotta learn how to walk before we start running, okay? And that's what the process is here. And unfortunately, you got pretty much a rookie group here that's working the planning commission. It doesn't mean we don't know anything, it just means that there are not enough of us who have had experience doing a master plan before. So, the process is, like I said, we gotta get information from the folks that are around us first, because that will help us do what we wanna do and do it right. And I'd much rather do it right and not be the first one across the finish line than I would be to be the first one across the finish line and find out I should have done something else along the process. So if we can come back with something and get a December idea of both for the board and the planning commission on the start of the master plan process, and provide a roadmap for people and a timeline that gives us, again, not a solid timeline, but generally speaking, so we can take a snapshot and say, look, this is what we're gonna do, and this is what we think we wanna do, and we may change it as we go along. You have to understand it. This process is very involved, and it takes a lot of input from people, especially to synthesize all of the processes down to get the answers that everybody wants. And as usual, if nobody's happy with it, then we did a good job. I mean, that's basically how it comes out, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think we'll be happy.
Thanks,
I think
Kurt.
we'll be happy.
Anything else for Zach, Chad, you have any? Favor of adjournment, if you guys are okay with that?
I vote for adjournment.
All right. Approved. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thanksgiving, guys. Hope you guys look stressed today.
Thank you, I really thank you.
These guys want to start getting ready for the first meeting. A lot of faces here.
I got 2 people here tonight. I got one guy who's hunting, I got somebody who's got COVID, I got another person who is, their daughter's sick, I got somebody else.
Yep.
But there are some areas.
One example of why prepositions matter. There is a community in Washtenaw County that, you know, in the front section here where it says, zoning ordinance adopted before the state and amendments to repeal. They said all zoning ordinances adopted on or before this date, which is the date they adopted the new one, are hereby appealed. Or before they repealed it as they adopted it. No one noticed that for 2 years before I was looking at it. You should check this because you don't.
Most of the time, we had no people.
So it has been.
For me, the most exciting thing after the master plan is getting you guys sorted.
Yes, I've been waiting since I've been here for that.
Because it feels, well, I have another community that's, it's trickier in a different way. It wasn't a good document, it wasn't a bad document when they started, but that was 12 years ago. And since then, the planning commission members have gotten together and drafted ordinance themselves without any oversight. And it is bonkers. Like, there's an attorney and I took a couple hours one day trying to figure out what to do with decks. Because unless something was different than that,
No, I just looked it up,
That's kind of like ours.
Yeah, no, it's.
well, and I think I told you this, but whenever I have to do review for you guys, I count on taking it 50% longer.
Not.
Just because,
I'd like to just throw and get started. But we'll know after the master plan. That's the most exciting part in my opinion.
how are you doing?
We really do want to move, so I was just saying to Kurt, I hope that it's, I think what we have, like what I looked at, is at least a framework. It would be great if we can go line by line and make it better.
Whatever they do sewers.
I know that there's things that need to be changed, and ordinances that need to be
Everything gets tied in.
correctly, et cetera, but I'm really looking
Three
forward
of us
to it.
together.
I hope that any surveys will be run by maybe a committee.
Oh, yes.
Not having that last, and I know you didn't write it, so.
Well, I helped, I tried to phrase it as best I could. The challenges were, we had like 3 days to do it in order to get it out with the tax bill.
The problem is that the supervisor didn't give you adequate information on what he had suggested, so that's why we want to get.
Yes,
How did you mention something about the lighting at the, because, yeah, there's definitely.